This is the historical timeline by Hannah Alexander. The first event is Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which outlawed segregated schools as an inconsistent with equal education. This court case said that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional, which allowed a lot of change for the future. This completely changed the education school system. The system was at a separate but equal stage, but they weren't equal at all. With this change, it allowed for the school systems to actually treat people more in an equal way. This is significant for ELLs because it allows a student of a different race that speaks English to get fair treatment in a school system. The second one is the National Defense Education Act of 1958, which was passed in response to Sputnik, the satellite that demonstrated the Soviet Union's early lead in space exploration. This was the first effort at the national level to strengthen mathematics, science, and foreign language instructions. This act allowed more instruction and better funding to these school systems so that they could teach more in different subjects. This is important for ELLs because it allowed them to get more instruction in the core classes and to get a better understanding of everything more than the basics. The third one is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which banned race, sex, and national origin discrimination in public facilities. This act allowed everyone to be treated the same out in public, and for African Americans not to be seen different from white people now, allowing more women in places that were just made for men. It created a better variety of people out in public. This is also important for ELLs because it allowed different people to go into the same places now without being treated different because of their race or language that they do speak. The fourth one is Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 which addressed the academic needs of poor children. This created a major change in the education system because now poor children could go to school and get the supplies that they need to be able to do so. They were finally funded in ways they had never been before. This is important for ELLs because not all of them had money and could afford to go to school, and they couldn't get the same education because of it. Now they can all go to school and learn. The fifth one is the Bilingual Education Act of 1968. This act was the U.S. government signaled for its first commitment to assisting students with limited English skills. This is important because the students that only knew a little English were having a hard time learning in schools because they did not understand what was being said all the time. They only knew a few words. This gave them the support and information that they needed. This is important to ELLs because the ones that only knew a little English could hardly communicate and understand what is going on in the classroom, and this allowed them to learn more English and get better at speaking it to be able to communicate with their teachers, classmates, and others in the public system. The next one is Law versus Nicholas, 1974. This case originated in 1970 when a San Francisco poverty lawyer, Edward Steinman, learned that a client's child was failing in school because he could not understand the language of instruction. These children were being denied education on equal terms. This case fought for the children that were being mistreated because of the language they spoke. These children couldn't understand what was being taught, so they couldn't do the work, which allowed them to fail. This case changed that for the students and allowed them to get the help they needed to understand school better. This is important for ELLs because it allowed those that need help so that they could understand school better. This is important because most students only knew a little bit of a language, their new language at a time. So this allowed the students that didn't fully grasp that language hope that they could pass school when they exceeded in that language. The next one is Serrano versus Portales Municipal Schools of 1974. This upholds a right to bilingual education for Mexican American children. This allows Mexican American children that most likely speak Spanish to be given the proper education, even though they speak a different language. This is important for ELLs because it helped teach the Mexican American children a different language while they were alongside the other kids that spoke English to give them hope that they could learn a new language. Most of the time it was African Americans that were thought to be different than the English or than the whites that knew English. But this court system or court case allowed the Mexican Americans that spoke Spanish hope that they would be able to get the right education when they didn't speak English. The next one is Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974. The Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974 was making law decisions part of the U.S. Code. This made everything that was included in the law part of the U.S. Code, which allowed it to be easier on different children to go to school without being treated differently. This is important for ELLs because no matter their race, they were going to be able to go to school and be equal to the others. Every part of the law decision for the U.S. Code was set into place, making no child seem different. They were all equal and deserved the same education. The next one was Castend versus Pickard. This sets a three-pronged test for school districts meeting obligations to English learners. This is important for ELLs because it makes sure that they are learning what they need to be and on the right track for their grade level. This not only holds the teachers accountable to teach the students what they need, but also holds the students accountable because they know they have to understand it to officially pass the test. Most students will just hear something and put it in the back of their brain or go in one ear and out the other. And with having this three-pronged test, it allows the English learners to have to pass a test to understand, so to make sure they understand everything that they are learning in the school system. And then the reference is Crawford James, Education English Learners, Language Diversity in the Classroom, the 5th edition that was created in 2004. All of these laws helped create the school system that is today, and without these, every student would be treated differently, and that is no way that a child should have to learn in the school system. With these 10 laws, it gave every child hope, no matter their race, religion, the language they spoke. They are allowed to go to school now because of the sacrifices that these people and children went through to get the education system the right way it is now. The first one, Brown versus Board of Education, started it all for these children because of Brown went to court to fight the education system that was bad because segregated schools were not equal, and the students that were segregated weren't learning the things that they needed to be. And so with this, it allowed whites and blacks to go to the same school and learn the same things in the same classroom and not be seen as different from one another. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act also is very important because this allowed children that didn't have money and couldn't get the right things they needed for school. It allowed them to have hope for school and that they could finally learn and be the same as the students that did have money.